Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark DiCarlo. Tonight my guest is Mr. Ray McMurrey, and Mr. Ray McMurray is president of the CCAFT. Is that right?
That is correct, sir.
What is the CCAFT?
The Corpus Christi American Federation of Teachers, and we chartered in 1976, and we're affiliated with the Texas American Federation of Teachers and the American Federation of Teachers.
And there's a difference between the AFT and the NEA, correct?
That is correct. The NEA, the National Education Association, and the AFT are the two large teacher unions in the United States. We're the two largest. The main difference is the AFT is affiliated with the AFL-CIO, and the NEA is not. In most of the states that have collective bargaining where NEA has those bargaining rights, AFT steps back. In those states where AFT is dominant and engages in collective bargaining, the NEA steps back so that we're not in direct competition with each other all the time.
The NEA, the National Education Association, is the largest labor union, according to a little bit of research I was able to do. Is that right?
That is correct.
And there was talk about merging the two unions. These are unions, right?
We really believe, and my philosophy as president of the Coastal Bend Labor Council, AFL-CIO, is that if you're not really a member of the AFL-CIO, you're not a union. You can be an association, you can organize workers, but until you affiliate with the AFL-CIO, you're really not a true union. That's my belief. The AFT.
It's interesting. But I mean, there's the Teamsters Union and things like that.
And the Teamsters are in some areas AFL-CIO. And then you're right, though. In certain areas like Austin, NEA and AFT have merged. So if you go to Austin and join the AFT, you're really going to join what's called Education Austin. And that is an AFT-NEA merged local. We have not merged at the national level, and we have not merged at the state level in Texas. But there are certain locals, even in Texas and around the country, that have taken the NEA membership and the AFT membership and merged them together, and that is occurring. But the structures are different. The AFT and the NEA have different philosophical, organizational structures, so it's hard to get that merger to happen. That's one of the things that's prevented the merger of the two at the national level.
If I'm a teacher at Moody High School, I could voluntarily join the CCAFT, or is it involuntary?
You must voluntarily join a union in Texas. Of course, we're right to work. I like to call it right to keep you poor state. There are 5 states in the entire country that absolutely prohibit the AFT from collectively bargaining a contract for a school teacher. And those 5 states are Texas, South Carolina, Virginia, Alabama, and Mississippi. They're also the 5 states in the United States with the lowest SAT and ACT scores on average for students. They also are the 5 exact states with the highest teenage pregnancy rate. They're also the 5 states with the highest dropout rate. The states that allow us to collectively bargain a contract for a teacher, you know, if you go to New Hampshire, if you go to Rhode Island, if you go to these states that allow the AFT to collectively bargain, they have the highest average SAT scores. Now, we're just talking student achievement. We know student achievement is higher where you engage the AFT in policy, where you keep the unions out, where the philosophy is let's teach them cheap and pack them deep. Those states that keep us, like Texas, where that teacher at Moody can go join whatever you want. We don't really want you to be organized. We'll give you the freedom to join whatever you want. Just please, whatever you do, don't really organize yourself and become a powerful entity and get engaged in policy where we can't just pack them deep and teach them cheap, where you really bring your expertise to the table and make a difference in public education.
Okay.
So hold on, let me hear me out. Not only is student achievement higher in these states, but teachers make more, their pensions are better, and they pay less out of their own pocket towards health care. So yeah, this teacher at Moody's sitting back and they can join in Texas whatever they want.
Okay, so I would agree that it would seem like the states that you mentioned, 4 of those 5 are probably the poorest states in the union, or at the very bottom. I believe those are all poor southern states, except for Texas. So I would agree with you there, but you keep referring to, and for the viewers, in other words, a school teacher does not have to join the American Federation of Teachers.
That's
in
correct.
Corpus Christi.
Correct.
So if I went over to Moody High School, what would be the percentage of teachers that were a member of the American Federation of Teachers?
We have about 50% density. We call it density in the labor movement. Of the potential workers that could join, how many are actually members? And we have about 2,300 teachers in Corpus Christi ISD, and half of those teachers belong to the AFT.
And what does a teacher pay to the AFT to be a member?
$25 a pay period. And it's on a sliding scale. So if you're a teacher, you pay $25 a pay period. If you're a custodian, you pay quarter dues. If you're a paraprofessional, you pay half dues. So we basically look at your income, and then you pay a proportion of that to the union in your dues.
And a pay period is?
Every 2 weeks.
Okay, so it's $50 a month.
That's correct.
A year. And I'll be very frank, I'd probably be one of those teachers that I would maybe slide, and then you're really in a way getting the benefit.
Right. Well,
you're getting the benefit without the cost if you don't join.
You can be a freeloader, and there are freeloaders out there. And you're right, but what they don't get and what they don't realize is that, look, whatever the AFT gets for their members in Texas, yes, it has to be for everybody, and maybe I could not pay my dues and still get that benefit. Mm-hmm. But how much more could we get if we were all united as educators? And you're a lawyer. Do you belong to the state bar?
Yes, sir.
Lawyers are smart. Everybody's in, whether you're a Democrat lawyer, Republican lawyer,
the state bar,
lawyer, fat lawyer.
Wait a minute. The state bar takes our money and persecutes lawyers. They do not help us in any way.
There's not a grievance process that the state bar handles?
The state bar, especially, my opinion, since you mentioned them as if they're doing something, the state bar, as far as I can tell, persecutes lawyers that represent people in such a manner that they're actually creating a barrier to the effective representation of people. Now, that's my opinion.
Right. No, but we can always point out weaknesses or problems with any entity. But the fact is, every single lawyer in Texas unites and belongs to the state bar to defend the profession. And they do a lot. And they do professional development. But they handle grievances. They do a lot of the things that the teachers' unions do.
That system was in place a long time ago, before I was ever an attorney. Yeah. I've never studied the system, and I don't know necessarily. You're supposing that I'm smart. I had no choice.
Right, but
they charge me whatever $250 to $450. You take continuing legal education. We keep this money. Then you have to set up this lawyer's trust account. We keep the interest. They set that up. I don't have a choice.
Right, but my point is I think the legal profession has organized themselves successfully, and they defend the profession.
You know what? Possibly.
And
I didn't
they have
so.
Imperfections. But has the legal community done that? Yes. If you were a medical doctor, everybody's in. You belong to the American Medical Association. And so the attempt in Texas is to
why
divide.
Don't the teachers do that?
That's what we're trying to do.
I
chair the collective bargaining committee for the state of Texas.
A teacher certification bureau or something, and then you set it up, and then you integrate yourself with the state. Instead of private, and then it'd be bingo.
The Texas legislature will not allow us to do that at this point. And my goal as AFT is to get collective bargaining for teachers by 2023. But we're going to have a pendulum shift in this state where we can legally allow our educators all to unite as one block so that we're all singing the same song. We're all standing for the same thing. We all know the problems, but they keep us divided so that we cannot come to the table and collectively bargain a contract.
But you did say something earlier in the interview, what we can get. So isn't that really what the...
What do you mean, what we can get?
I don't know. That's what you said. What we can get, what the teachers can get. Isn't that really what you're trying to achieve, is how much money the teachers can make?
No, and that's the big misconception. When the Chicago AFT went on strike, and in Chicago every teacher belongs to AFT, and when they took the vote to strike, it was the first teacher strike in 25 years, 2 years ago. It was all over the news. It was a big strike. They voted 98% to 2% to strike. So it wasn't the union boss saying, let's all go on strike and do something irresponsible. The teachers democratically voted, and it was overwhelming to strike. It was the first big teacher strike in 25 years, and the symptoms are very much the same of what teachers are unhappy about what's going around across the country. And the media, especially Fox News, the teachers just want more money for themselves. That's why they're striking. It was the furthest thing from the truth. The pay issue was already settled. What Chicago was going to do was tie 50% of the teacher evaluation to student test scores. And in an inner city poverty-stricken school, what the teachers were saying is, look, these kids need services. We want more school nurses. We want more people, doctors to come in here and check their vision because nobody's going to help them get glasses. We want more intervention in school psychologists to come in here and actually provide the wraparound social services these kids need before they can ever learn to read and write. And so that's what the Chicago strike was about. And when I say get more things for the teaching profession, you have to realize these are people that go into this profession never intending to get rich. We don't close the deal. We're not after a profit. We're not trying to make a buck. These are people that give every day of their lives, after school, weekends, so that we can create a better generation for the next generation. And that's who we are. And when I say get things for the teaching profession, what I mean is how do we improve public education? Because we're the ones that spend the days with those students every day. Nobody knows those kids better than we do. And do I think that we should have a fair wage? You better believe it. Do I think that we should have a pension? You better believe it. Do I think that you should have access to health care? You better believe it. But you know what? Every American should. There's no reason why we should be denying every American a right to a fair wage, a fair public pension, and a fair, decent standard of living.
If I go to Sinton, Texas, or many cities smaller cities in Texas, I'm of the opinion that many times the best jobs in those cities are like the school teacher jobs. Isn't that true?
It could be. I mean, I think if you're in a small town, you don't have a lot of capital investment. You don't have a lot of job creation. So therefore, whatever public services are afforded to that area may be the jobs that are found in that area.
And I've been to small towns and I've heard resentment about that. You know, the teachers are making all the money in this town, et cetera. So you talked about collective bargaining, but I don't know it's very clear what collective bargaining is.
Well, collective bargaining is the idea that collectively, the owner and the worker, or the person owning the factory, the board of directors, will make decisions about how much do we pay our workers? What rights should the workers have? Should they have sick days? How much do we put in towards their own pension, and how much should we take out of their paycheck? There are lots of things. All of those things impact quality of life. You know, how I pay my bills. Can I save for a college education? So when the worker is out there in the factory or in the plant or in the school, in the prison, we have in Beeville, we have prison guards that are organized in the union. You know,
in the AFT?
No, through the AFL-CIO. Okay. They're AFSCME. But my point is, collective bargaining is the respectful arrangement where the worker and the owner can sit down together to talk about pension, pay, working conditions. And I think when you don't allow that to happen, you foster exploitation. The general tendency for a corporation is not bad, but the intent is to make a profit. And when that goal of making a profit is never checked with balance in terms of what is the public good, what is proper revenue sharing, how much should we invest back into safety, all of those are questions that when you're blindly driven by profit, which is not bad in itself, but it has to be a check and a balance. Collective bargaining is the respectful process between workers and ownership so that we can really look at what is the fair way to do business in America. And it is a historic process. It has been supported by Republicans and Democrats until the last 20 or 30 years, where we have gutted international trade agreements. We've fostered the subsidizing of exporting jobs out of this country, and they want everybody, even Americans, unfortunately, to be able to work at slave wages. And it is a race to the bottom. And if you can gut unions and you can get rid of collective bargaining, then we can just subsidize our corporations to take those jobs overseas, lower production cost, and that's kind of what's happened to the American middle class.
Well, the teachers, and my father said that, the teachers and the firemen, et cetera, are kind of in a preferred, in an envied position because those jobs can't be outsourced. All the manufacturing jobs that unionized were outsourced. And then, it's even worse, of course, and I mentioned it before, you have a minimum wage here, but you don't have a minimum wage in Taiwan or whatever.
Right.
So the American workers have a minimum wage in place, and they don't have a minimum wage over there, which, you could argue is kind of a union benefit or program of some sort. But
I will just say, I believe there are people here that would love to outsource even our teaching positions and our fire protection if they could. There are certain things in the economy that are owned by the private sector and some that are what we call public goods, because if left to privatization, not everybody would be served. I mean, we don't have private fire departments where my home's on fire, I need some help. Well, is this going to be Visa or American Express? We serve those folks that are in need, and they're supposed to be served equitably and equally, depending on the demand. And so we have public goods, and teaching and fire protection. Those are public services that we've always provided, and those workers in those public jobs should have the right to organize and collectively bargain.
What does a school teacher, if I have a bachelor's degree and I start working at, I think I keep saying Moody.
Yeah,
Whatever.
42,600. If you're a brand $42,600 is going to be what a right out of college, a bachelor's degree teacher makes. Now I will tell you, over the longevity of the next 20 years, you're not going to make very much more. Okay, that seems like a lot as an entry level, but after you work 20 years, you're going to be able to still be making $52,000.
Well, let me say something about that.
Yeah.
I think that's more than what the local attorneys working for the district attorney's office start at. And just in comparison, because you mentioned lawyers earlier, and I think the lawyer works much harder because I don't think he doesn't get off, whatever it is, 2 weeks Christmas, assuming the teachers get off, and he doesn't get off the holidays. So I think, at least initially,
those are always opinions. I mean, my mom's a lawyer and she taught. She said teaching was much harder. But
is that right?
Yeah, so much more demanding. But it depends on.
If you could smack those kids, it'd be an easier job, right?
So
I'm just kidding. Well, what about that? Since I said that inadvertently, because actually I did in-school suspension when I was 22 years of age in Ohio. That was a new program. Now I understand they still have it, but I don't think all the they don't have to have a bachelor's degree or anything
to teach.
No, to do the in-school suspension program.
No, you don't have to have a teaching certificate, and not necessarily even a bachelor's degree to do the in-school.
So I did that, and it was a new program when I was 22, and I was talking to a guy I knew that was a teacher back then, and then it was, of course, when you're young, and you're passionate, you don't have everything under control, and you just feel like you can lose your temper pretty easy with the kids, especially if they're pushing you, right?
Right, that's tough. So dealing with discipline is
that part of your deal?
Channel 6 just did an online poll. They've asked teachers to call in on student discipline. It has over 600 hits right now in comments. It is a profound problem in our public school system with student behavior and student discipline. And when you allow...
Is the problem student behavior, or is it problem student discipline? So you're saying it's a profound problem, the way that kids are acting, right?
Right.
That's a real problem in the school.
Well, right. The problem is that teachers are not being backed up by the administration. They're not being, the teachers no longer are empowered and have the professional judgment to call out poor behavior and to take action on it.
The deal was you used to take the child to the office, right?
Right. And the principal would deal with the discipline. Now they send it back to the room and blame the teacher for not being able to control the room. The problem just continues to fester. Kids go home with all kind of stories. The kids are using the F word, the B word. They're cussing out my teacher in class, and the teacher tries to report it, but the administration doesn't want the data. They don't want to have to deal with it. And here's the reality: even in Texas and the United States, there's new laws around school accountability and school ratings. So if you suspend too many students, then the school gets dinged as low performing, and you lose funding, and you could get closed. So they don't want to report it.
But the unions are kind of arguably could be part of that problem because they're also centralizing the power out of the hands of the school, et cetera.
We believe in local control.
Instead of having an autonomous school, then you have these totally autonomous, wherein they don't have this testing and all this, and the teachers could do what they want. You have a unionization throughout the state.
The unions are opposed to the corporatization and mandated government outcomes in public education. You have a corporate takeover of our public education system,
done a good job
and they're
of that,
using the Department of Education and Race to the Top under Obama, which is just a continuation of No Child Left Behind, where the government is imposing outcomes, and they're using these accountability standards, which is really just an illusion of learning, and it's false data. But when you mandate government outcomes, you're going to get cheating. You are going to get the reporting of false data, and that's what we're doing with discipline. The principals don't want, and the superintendent does not want CCISD to have 20,000 expulsions or 10,000 referrals or a record of 8,000 kids going to ISS. Because once you show that you're dealing with the discipline, then you go into an accountability standard that says, oh, well, your school is out of control. You're going to get rated down. You could now be an IR school, improvement required. And now TEA goes in and takes over, and it becomes a fiasco where it just gets them really closer to what they really want, vouchers and charters. but it's an illusion of learning where we are not controlling the discipline. We're not respecting the teachers to deal with the behavior problems that are existing in the schools because they're not getting the support by the administration.
So there's behavioral problems by the students, and then so if I'm teaching at Moody and a teenager cusses me out, obviously I can't cuss him back out, right?
Correct.
And obviously I can't.
Even if you yell at the student, you're going to be in trouble.
I can't touch the student. Is that right?
You cannot touch the student.
And I can't take him to the office, so it's like a torture chamber then.
It devolves. It doesn't evolve. We're devolving.
One of the problems is, of course, is that famous song by, was it Pink Floyd, The Wall? No stark sarcasm in the classroom, right?
Right.
I think that's no dark sarcasm in the classroom. So if you can't physically control the child, or you can't take him for a bureaucratic thing, then you have to use this psychological manipulation or sarcasm, which to me is a form of treachery, which is worse. Are you allowed to, humiliation and things?
No, well, it depends on how far it goes or what's reported. But if you even humiliate, you have to be and we are professionals. We can't talk down to kids, but we expect when the student does misbehave that the system should take care of the problem. Because really what it's about, what the teacher really wants is to protect the learning environment of the classroom. We have a responsibility, and some of these classes have 30, 35 kids, sometimes more, and in high schools. And we have a responsibility to teach them all. So when one starts to degrade the classroom environment, the teacher has to have the power and the ability to say, you know what, this has been repetitive, I have documentation, this student continues to make the learning environment a stifling environment where innocent children can no longer learn. I need this student removed. I need this student to go to maybe an alternative placement type education. But when they just keep sending this kid back, and the kid begins to laugh at me, the teacher, because you can't do anything to me, and I can really say anything in this classroom I want. I can now bring half of the other class over and prevent real learning from going on for innocent children. Now as a teacher, now you're even saying you're going to evaluate me based on the student test scores. And so if you're going to evaluate me as a teacher based on how I educate these kids, well then you need to give me the power to get rid of the ones that are disrupting the learning environment for everybody else. And so we've kind of, it's a catch-22. We're telling the teachers, you better have high test scores, you better educate these kids, but don't say anything. We're going to make you keep all the bad behavior in your room.
But isn't the liberal attitude, doesn't that fit in the liberal attitude of the unions themselves? We're in, hey, don't hit anybody, and don't throw anybody out of school, and we're all the same, and whether it's don't fire anybody, and
I think that's another misconception.
No,
because we actually AFT helped write the law. It's called the Texas Safe Schools Act, and teachers are empowered under the Texas Safe Schools Act. But you have to write a special letter. You have to invoke the Safe Schools Act, Chapter 37, and you have to say, I want this student removed out of my classroom because of the disruptive nature where it's preventing other kids from being able to learn. But when teachers write that letter, they're sometimes retaliated against. And so
by the administration.
By the administration.
And that was something I was going to ask. Are the principals allowed to be members of the AFT?
They cannot, because we are an organized union represented by the AFL-CIO. It's a conflict of interest for us to represent the administration and the worker.
And the assistant principal is not a member of the AFT, etc.
No administrator can join the AFT.
It reminds me a little bit of the factories up north that I'm familiar with, wherein the foreman is not a member of the union, right? Mm-hmm. So the foreman is not a member of the union, and is somebody who's a member of the AFT much less likely to be able to get a principal or in a school administration job because he's a member of the AFT?
No, but I can speak to my history here. We have a rich history in Corpus Christi ISD of the AFT and the district working cooperatively together. We have consultations. We have a good working relationship. But even though we don't represent the principals, there are times where, because they're under the accountability standards too, if the numbers aren't right, they get fired. So they're under a lot of pressure to make the numbers right also. So anybody that is not producing the numbers that the government needs in terms of mandated outcomes is now subject to termination and intimidation. But overall, I feel like we have, even though we can't represent administrators, we do have a good working relationship here. We've had 2 people from our executive board just in the last 2 years become assistant principals of schools. And we do very, very strong PD training with the district The district understands that we're a resource and we're an asset when we work together. We have licensed professional development trainers that are teachers that work for the district, where the teachers can train other teachers, and they see that as an asset, and they value us in that respect. So, the myth that we protect bad teachers, that we don't bring value to the table, that's bogus and rubbish. I don't believe in that.
Well, okay, but you do seem to be complaining about the same sort of socialized administrative bureaucracy that, in a way, a union kind of is bringing in at a different level, right?
Right. But the administrator is a victim of circumstance as well. It's not, the administrator is caught up in the same accountability rat race. So even though they're imposing things and not dealing with behavior like we want them to, they are also tied to the same numbers. If the numbers are not right, it's not just the teacher that's in trouble. Now the administrator's in trouble. And these administrators are making six figures off the taxpayer dollars. I mean, these are very highly paid public sector
jobs.
School
superintendent is $275,000 or something unbelievable.
So if I'm making six figures off the taxpayer dollars, and I'm just a bureaucrat, mid-level management, I'm just going to do what the state tells me to do. I'm just going to enforce the policies and not. Because where else am I going to get a salary?
Well,
like
you know that you've got to play ball.
That's right.
But okay. So here's the vision. Get rid of centralized testing. Let's say you get rid of centralized testing totally, like they didn't have it when I was in school, right? Okay, you get rid of that, and then you get rid of the teachers' unions, and you have a totally laissez-faire school administration system like you used to, like when I was a kid, and they assert that it worked better.
Well, the unions started in 1916, so I would say most Americans, anybody that we would talk to, even our grandparents, were probably raised
by okay. I was under the impression that unionization really took hold at a certain point.
The AFT,
in the 60s
no, the 70s. AFT began, and that's what really makes our union unique, is that we are the oldest. I mean, we were formed in 1916 in Chicago and New York, and we've spread around the country. And so anybody that was raised in America in the 20th century was very likely to have been raised by a union teacher. And so I just fundamentally don't buy into that notion. I think that any worker, it doesn't matter if you're a teacher, lawyer, doctor, factory worker, workers doing a job have the right to talk to each other and share experiences and look at the profits that a company or is making, or what the working conditions in that public sector arrangement look like. And they should be able to work with the administration and be partners in deciding the outcomes for workers. I just believe in that. I mean, that's what collective bargaining is about. I don't think schools would work better if you didn't allow teachers as professionals to organize into a union.
Well, I would say philosophically, I don't agree that the employees should necessarily be able to bargain. Oh, well, look, you're making all this money, so I think.
Well, we do know from this the facts, like those states we mentioned earlier, the states that have the best public education systems in America, where we can actually objectively say, look, what does the average kid make on the SAT when they come out of high school? What is the dropout rate? What is the teenage pregnancy rate? How much do teachers actually put into their own pension compared to the state? All of the measurable things that we can look at in terms of quality of life for professional educators, student achievement on their side, those are the union states. The union states just have better data. The states that prevent the union from being at the table have lower standards everywhere.
But teenage pregnancy shouldn't really be in any way correlated with education.
I think if you, we even are pushing for universal education. We want to start getting 3- and 4-year-olds into the schools, because the sooner that we can start teaching children and educating them, I believe as a teacher, I've had students come back to me, let's go to lunch. They bring their son, and I wanted you to meet the person that I named him after. And you don't ever realize you're having those kind of impact on kids. So I do believe that where you empower teachers and you really allow them to act as professionals, they are genuinely in this business for the right reasons, and they can impact the quality of life for kids. And I think that I do think that there's a correlation, and even perhaps a causation, that in those states where teachers are really treated like professionals, they can have an impact on students' life that could translate into making better decisions, even around things like teenage pregnancy.
Well, I've got to be frank. I'm not necessarily. Everyone thinks differently, and I don't know that teenage pregnancy is such a big deal. they can get pregnant. It's been known throughout history teenagers get pregnant.
Right.
The only issue to me is, I guess, whether or not they're married, or whether or not they're married. And I guess if they're married, I don't see anything wrong with it.
Well,
but I know there's this. I don't really know what's going on with the whole teenage pregnancy issues.
Well, to me, it's a women's, and I'm a father of 2 daughters. So this is about when you know that when a young person has a child, their life is changed dramatically, and it becomes a responsibility. Maybe for the better, but it certainly limits now your choices of what you have in terms of autonomy over your life. So we need young girls and women to have the opportunity to move into the workforce and make their own decisions about what my options are for college. So a male can impregnate a young girl and move, and you're right, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse, we don't know, but he still has a right to move on and live their life if he chooses to not be responsible for that child. And maybe the girl doesn't have to be responsible for the baby either.
They'll hound him to the end of the earth.
But they're gonna deliver that baby. There's a different, and so I personally believe this is a women's issue as well. Teenage pregnancy impacts the ability for women to integrate into the economy and be on solid footing with males. And so I do think that young girls, and I think that relationships with teachers and students, we can help foster a sense of responsibility for kids. What are good decision-making apparatuses? We're not in the schools. We're not just teaching math and science and history. We're teaching students we're creating a better civilization. And I think that's lost in the testing and accountability culture is that we are here to teach kids to think, to become problem solvers, to be good citizens, to build a civilization. The schools don't exist so that my daughter can get a job. The schools don't exist just because I'm a taxpayer and my daughter's in school. All of us need public education so that we can build a civilization that really teaches citizens how to engage and think. That is the purpose of public education.
I guess going backwards, if you believe necessarily a career in education is better for these young women than being a mother, I think that's a big gap. That's an assumption that we've been told the last 30 to 40 years that I don't necessarily, whether or not, whatever I think, I may not even think that. But I think that's a big gap in logic that people have come up with. And I think that it is a little bit, as representing the union, you are stating a lot of social philosophies, etc., that you're necessarily endorsing.
Well, and I don't think it's just that a girl has a right to an education. If she also is going to go work in a factory, let's say the guy takes off, the young girl has the baby, she's 19 years old, she's not going to go to college, but she's going to go get a job. What is she going to pay in child care today? What does child care really cost on average for one child?
Well, it's very expensive.
And so all of a sudden, now her quality of life and her decisions and the limits that she has are not as free as someone without a child. And so if that was an unwanted pregnancy in any way, if we didn't do, really the bottom line is can we do a better job of helping students make good decisions? Can the schools play a factor in that? And I really feel like in those states that respect teachers, where they allow collective bargaining, where we know public education outcomes are better, we also have a correlation of helping young ladies become independent women in this economy, in this society. And I think there is a correlation there that's important.
Well, obviously, again, I'm just asserting or insinuating that there's a lot of things taken for granted in the public media today that you're endorsing, and that's fine. I would be probably in the strict minority in terms of questioning some of the things that I'm saying. That these jobs, these careers. I've heard that word career for years. For example,
right.
A career. A career is just a job, to me, and
Well,
I don't know. It's a job. I don't see that big a difference between digging a hole or being a lawyer. The work's still got to be done. You got to be there 8 to 5 or whatever it is. You still got to be there. And I think the glamorization of a career, et cetera, has really been sold, for example, to women. That and I'm just wondering, in terms of social policy, which you're endorsing a certain sort of social policy, that's so important, et cetera. Well, maybe it is. And I know that I'd be in the strict minority on that. So on the terms of, you talked about vouchers and you talked about
charter schools.
Now, the voucher would be such that which I think the Republican or the right wing is endorsing pretty much, is say, well, look, instead of going to a public school, we'll give you a voucher for $3,000 a year. You can go to public school, private school, etc. And the unions are pretty much against that, maybe because that's a form of union busting. I don't know, or they don't think the quality is going to be high. Or what is your opinion of the vouchers?
Well, it's a big loaded question. There's a lot there, but we are opposed to vouchers. We're opposed to using public dollars to take outside of the public system. That when we pay taxes to support public education, those dollars should be targeted for public control and public utilization. We have school choice today. You can go to a private school, you can go to a public school, and we have a lot more choice than people realize. Even within the public system today, we have open enrollment. The new high school that's about to open, any kid in Corpus Christi can go there.
I know.
You don't have to live in
That's
that boundary. And so the public system and public schools are doing a much better job today by making sure that there is choice, making sure that we have schools of choice where there's specializations, whether you want health and science or these academies that are publicly controlled. And so we are doing a much better job of providing choice to the public. But we just cannot blur the lines of public and private, and not just for religious reasons, but for quality control. Because when you start giving vouchers, and the experiments now are very profound. Minnesota started these, back 20 years ago, and now the results are showing that the public schools are outperforming the charter. So there's no guarantee that even once you take these dollars out of the public system, that on average the charters are way underperforming our traditional schools. And here's what happens. Who do you think the first kids are we're going to give vouchers to everybody now. Who do you think's the first to sign up? The most motivated parents.
Yeah.
The most motivated
parents,
kids, the most motivated parents. So they take their voucher and then they take it and go spend it somewhere else. So you're taking dollars out of what's left in the public school system. So your average cost of educating those that are left, your high cost kids are still there. Your cheapest kids to educate have taken the voucher and run. And so your average cost of educating kids has now gone up, and it's costing the taxpayers more because now your average cost per child goes way up. Your hard to teach kids, so to speak, are still what's left in the public system. And you begin to subsidize private interest, which we don't believe in. And what also happens is if I'm a wealthy family, I take now a $5,000 subsidy that I really didn't need. I go pay for a $25,000 a year private school. And so now you've subsidized a really rich person's private education, and they only have to pay the remaining balance. If I'm really, really poor, I'm going to think, okay, now I've got a choice. I'm going to take my $5,000, and now I can only go shop for a school that actually costs $5,000. So your rich kids are all over here at the $25,000 a year school. All the poor kids are the ones that cost exactly what the voucher cost. And this, what you do is you get segregation. You get economic segregation. And so the voucher experiment is nothing new. They're still going to try to divert public money for private interest. That's the name of the game sometimes in politics. But we have to keep fighting that back. Vouchers and charters have proved to be less performing. They proved that they don't serve the interest of those high-need students. It drives up the average cost within the public school system, and it is a economically segregating lowest common denominator for the people that can least afford it.
I would say that it would seem that the privatization, for example, of prisons has been very unsuccessful. My opinion, based upon what I've read, in other words, it has increased the number of prisoners, and that the care really isn't that much better. And it's kind of a similar argument, I think, to the voucher issue. But the one thing that you said is you have choice now. You can go to a private school. Having said that, though, I don't know, because the taxation is so extreme now for property, etc. Unlike when I was a child, and that it was very possible, I think, to afford to send your child to a private school. And private schools used to be, of course, especially the parochial, the Catholic schools. The Catholic schools were so cheap. I don't think you could afford. I don't think that's an option now. The private schools, you just don't have enough money after all these taxes.
Right,
these
it is tough.
Taxes.
But you could say the same for anything. You know, we do offer a public education system in neighborhood schools. They should be equitably funded. They should be strong, and you should have a right to go to your neighborhood school. Texas, unfortunately, and this is going out of the Supreme Court, it has been found unconstitutional how we fund our schools. The Texas Constitution says that we'll adequately and equitably fund public education in this state. The courts have said we're not doing that. And so that's another problem. But when when I go shop for anything, whether I go buy a car, if I have to make a choice, do I want to spend more on a brand new Corvette, or do I want to maybe buy the Ford Edge? Okay, and so that's the same. Anytime anybody takes their dollars, they have to make a choice. If somebody really wants to go to a private school, you're right. Maybe they've got to give up some other things. Maybe we don't take that vacation that we really wanted every other year. And so there's a give and take. There's opportunity cost, but it's always a choice. If I want to go pay for private education, yes, it may be harder, and high taxes don't help that situation. But that's on anything that we buy in this economy. We always are it's a trade-off.
Do you think that one of the do you think that this is off point, but I don't know what made me think of it what you're talking about. But
that's all right.
There is discussion, private discussion, not so much in the public arena. You know about morals clauses for teachers. When you have a certain amount of scandal regarding sex between teachers and students, some very high-profile cases, especially like young women. The media loves those stories, right?
Oh yeah.
They love those stories, but there is like private discussions of, well, gee, where are the morals clauses? The way some of these people live, and I'm going to have my child taught by these people, whatever it is illegitimate children, serial marriages, criminal records. There's no, where I'm sure that the unions would say, well, look, that doesn't make any difference. That doesn't have that doesn't have anything to do with the performance of the teacher, etc. I would assume that's your opinion.
We are constantly striving for higher standards on who gets to become a teacher. We've actually called and published a journal, Raising the Bar, where we've come up with our own prescription about how do we strengthen the standards of recruiting teachers, training teachers, keeping teachers through professional training. It's the politicians, Mark, that actually fight us on that. They want to be able to do it on the cheap. They've even gone to alternative ways and allow people to come in backdoor ways. I mean, can you imagine?
Yeah, I've seen that.
If I wanted to become an attorney and compete against you in the market here, can you imagine if they let me just take a few classes for a few months and become a lawyer? And that's where the state bar would never allow that to happen. And when I mentioned earlier about your state bar being powerful, protecting your profession, why are we allowing backdoor people to come in and just enter the classroom? Because it's cheap. And because they don't respect the teaching profession.
That aren't certified and/or
they've got people coming in. They've got people coming into the. Let's raise the bar on how we recruit teachers. Let's raise the bar on who gets to become a teacher. Let's make it competitive. In Denmark, who's knocking the lights out on the international testing, it's more competitive to become a teacher than a doctor. Their standards are higher to become a teacher than a doctor. So when society says, oh, look what they're doing bad, I said, no, I'm going to put it back on you, society. Where are you in terms of what are we doing to strengthen the criteria for who becomes a teacher? And are you really willing to pay for that? And I will tell you that these cases the media exploits are for sensation. We've got millions of teachers in this country. And when there are always going to be bad apples. You've got bad law enforcement. Sometimes you get caught with child pornography. You've got bad bankers that are white-collar crime. I mean, you're always going to be able to find a few bad folks, and the union will never defend those teachers. They get due process, but we're not going to defend that. At the end of the day, if you're going to break the law and act immoral, we're not here to defend that kind of behavior. And when a teacher behaves that way in these sexual exploits where they're exploiting children or taking advantage of those things, they deserve what's coming to them. And the union will give them due process, and we will allow the process to play out.
When you say the union will give them due process,
right?
The union gives them a lawyer?
The union we have our own attorneys. We have a legal defense.
So if I'm a member of the AFT in Corpus Christi and I get some sort of a complaint, how does that work?
Usually what happens is an allegation is made, and the district doesn't want to have liability on their part by not investigating it properly. Mm-hmm. So the first thing with an allegation, a teacher's usually suspended with pay. We're not accusing you yet. You're going to get your pay, but don't come back, and we'll do our internal investigation. The police department will come in, and we'll gather the facts, and we'll figure out if the teacher really did break the law, or there's misconduct or reason for termination. And so we wait for that investigative report to come back, and there's usually a hearing. Okay, if the district decides to move against that teacher and just terminate them, We have to basically see, was the investigation handled properly? Is there really enough evidence here to move against this teacher? And we could defend them. And they get due process, they get a hearing, they get an independent hearing officer, but it also depends on the contract they have. They've changed the laws in Texas, so now teachers don't have the same contract rights. Some of the new teachers don't get the same appeal process where an independent hearing officer really gets to hear the case, even when we think there's a wrongful termination. But we could fight the case, or we could say, look, you're in a tough spot. It may be time for you to move on. And we have counseled people out of the profession. Believe it or not, the union will have kind of a come to Jesus meeting. We have to do that sometimes. But if the employee wants to fight it, and there are grounds, we usually let our lawyers look at the case. We'll give them legal counsel. You got a case or you don't. And we will.
So you have the lawyer look at a case and give the opinion regarding whether or not it's a case.
It's a valid case, yeah. Whether you have whether you really have a case or not. Because do we really want to spend our members' dues chasing frivolous cases and defending a case that we know we're going to lose?
Who makes that decision? You?
I do. And I will tell you. Let me just tell you this. I've been in my position 5 years. There's only been one case in 5 years that we took all the way to the commissioner. We went beyond the school board, we appealed the case, went before the commissioner, brought in the attorneys, we did defend the teacher, and we won the case. They found that the district acted in wrongful termination. And so we don't abuse the process.
Do they have personal animus against this teacher, do you think? Personal dislike, is that why?
I think so. I think so. They didn't have all the facts, and certainly were using emotion rather than good judgment.
People come to conclusions. Who's the commissioner that you brought this before? What commissioner?
At the time, 5 years ago?
No, what commissioner or what?
The commissioner of education. The governor appoints a commissioner of education that kind of oversees TEA, and the commissioner has a lot of power. And so when it goes to the commissioner, when you appeal to, you get an independent hearing officer. And so that independent hearing officer can make a ruling.
Where is this panel of independent hearing officers? Where are they drawn from that decide these cases if a teacher is guilty of some sort of malfeasance or negligence or whatever? Where's he come from? Him or she?
They come from the TEA and the commissioner's office. I mean, that's the state. Those folks actually work for the state.
Okay, and so you have a hearing ultimately in Austin, Texas?
Yes, we have that hearing usually in Austin.
Okay, and let's say that,
or they could be contracted out. There's approved vendors, so to speak. I mean, there's people that are approved to be independent hearing officers.
And what I'm implying is there's no procedure to actually have a jury trial. Is that correct?
There is not. No. Usually, what will happen is if we don't get the result we wanted, if a teacher doesn't get the result they wanted through an independent hearing officer, they perhaps then could move on to a jury trial and sue in the courts. Okay, so after all this is over, your employee can actually file a lawsuit in court? Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. Would the AFT finance that? That'd be an expensive proposition.
It would depend on the case. I mean, we really have to look at the nature of what happened.
Have you done it?
Yes, there's been one incident where we are going to the courts on a wrongful termination.
So that's interesting.
But we're in that process right now, so we don't have a verdict. But typically, the independent hearing officer, that's where we appeal, and we either get a settlement or we win or lose. And even in Texas, though, here is what the law tells the district. Even if we win, and the employee says, we were able to tell the employee, look, this was a wrongful termination. We can't just say you have a right to go back to work. The school district then has two options. They can reinstate the employee, or they can pay them 1 year's salary in advance and you walk away in good standing. But they can buy you out. The district can, even if the employee wins, you can be bought out and separate in good standing. That is the Texas law.
And let's say that I wanted to hire this school teacher at another school system, and this school teacher got the payout. Is any of this of record that I could see what this teacher got fired for, what the hearing was about, the disposition?
No, because they won. There isn't. I mean, there is no. The TEA, your certification is going to be intact because you won the case. So you would have a clean record.
But that it reminds me a little bit like that could happen in some of these bureaucracies is like they just get rid of the problem by transferring. It's kind of a cover up a little bit. Like the Catholic Church came under attack for moving
Right.
people,
Mm-hmm.
and then.
And I think that I think that there still is in this country though. You're innocent until proven guilty, and sometimes I think that even when we deal with employees, there has to be a threshold of more than just smoke. You do have to have evidence.
That's a point.
And so once you have the evidence, I think it's in a district. If the district knows there's guilt and the district refuses to take action, that's on the district. And usually the district does do the right thing. I mean, if they know for a fact there is cause for termination, they usually do that. And if we then have to say, okay, we know the facts are against you, we'll try to provide the right legal counsel for you to give you, look, this is where you stand in terms of being able to move forward. So, I don't think I don't think it's rampant that we're just moving bad people around.
I understand.
I think has that ever happened? Probably, but I don't think it's a problem where it's happening where it's rampant.
And I haven't seen necessarily that some of these sexual scandals were pre-existing and the teacher was moved and it was covered up.
Yeah,
I haven't seen that
usually.
No,
I think usually the right thing is usually done. And it's hard to, we don't support immoral behavior for teachers. If you're going to do that kind of thing, you're going to pay the consequences.
And the charter schools, we have a couple. How many charter schools do we have in Corpus Christi?
I don't know the exact number, but we don't have them as ready as and as available as some of the other urban areas. We do have a few, so they are out there.
I think one of our city council persons, Colleen McIntyre, is affiliated with a
right. She on the island. She has a charter school on the island.
Is that her school?
I believe she's on the board of directors, but I don't know exactly where she is on the.
So Mark DiCarlo wants to start a charter school tomorrow. Excuse me for interrupting you. He wants to start a charter school. I don't know, whatever it is, school for having goofballs or free thinkers or whatever it would be.
Yeah.
And how do I do that? I have to meet some sort of certification requirements. I'm assuming that's like a corporation or a profit-making school. What's occurring here?
Let me give you an example. In Florida, where they've gone the rampant of accountability, where they've now allowed ALEC to come in and tie teacher evaluations and school closures to test scores, that's just the first step. Where they want to go next is vouchers and charters. So once they can label you underperforming and say this school's not doing their job, we now have to divert money to a for-profit operator. The threshold for being able to start a charter is really low. In Florida, there's a group called Academica, and they want to come to Texas. Academica is really a group of real estate tycoons. They are all property real estate managers, owners, and they started a school, and they called it Academica. But you see, it's a board of directors. It's not democratically controlled by a school board. Academica can go set up shop wherever the laws allow charters to move in. And so you have this board of directors named Academica. What they usually do is they wait for the laws that are in place. Like right now, we have reconstituted schools at Gibson, at Zavala, at Oak Park. All those schools are being reconstituted. The reconstitution law in Texas says reconstitution, alternative management. So if these schools now next don't get it right, you're going to open the door for an alternative management scenario to come in, perhaps like an Academica. They want to come to Texas. And so then they could divert public money into their coffers. But what Academica does is they go into these areas that are usually low income, low performing around the test. They rent then cheap real estate commercial property at low cost, right?
Yeah,
and then redesign it a little bit.
Yeah,
put up a sign, Academica, put out this slick brochure of all these special, what they're going to provide. Maybe the teachers are certified, maybe they're not. You don't have school nurses. You don't have the same level of accountability and counselors inside that building. It's basically a commercial real estate property scam where now they're getting they can divert the per pupil funding into Academica. And really all they've done is rented commercial real estate property to turn for a profit. And they're making 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times the money off that building they ever could have got had they actually rented it in that neighborhood and tried to run a business.
That's interesting. That's some sort of a large kind of conspiracy, I guess, occurring.
Well, it's happening. It's not a conspiracy.
But let's say that could whatever, I'm an attorney, and I wanted to start a charter school, could I do it? Is that permissible? I mean, it
Yes.
seems to me that that's what's going on.
Right.
And then you apply for some sort of state charter, and then I guess you get a voucher from these kids or something, $3,000 a year, and then any money you get over that you get to keep.
Right. So
Or
inherently,
divvy up among your staff, even though it's probably nonprofit.
right.
Go ahead, sir.
So the idea is to continue to cut your cost, and so that you can make the most bang for your buck off the voucher
Right.
that you're getting, and so we don't have a problem with the right for private schools and charters to exist, but we never want to see public dollars following children into these for-profit entities. If you don't have a democratically elected school board governing that school, then we don't believe public dollars should go there.
Are you elected?
I'm elected.
Okay, so you're elected by everybody affiliated here in Nueces County or Corpus Christi?
Well, our charter with the AFT represents 6 school districts. We have CCISD, we have Flower Bluff and Toloso Midway and Cal Allen, West Oso, Gregory Portland. And CCISD is the bulk of our membership because it's the largest district. But any of those, if you work in those schools, then you belong to the AFT affiliated with our charter, and you have the right to re-elect me every 2 years. If you're in Robstown, you can belong to AFT, but you're not part of CCAFT, and you don't get to vote for me. So only our members, which are 2,500 members, can re-elect me every 2 years.
Do you get much complaint from? Do you get much complaint from teachers who feel they're being treated unfairly by the administration? And when they complain, do they complain to you, or do you have some sort of a grievance process against the administration, and then you address it personally? How does that work?
Many of the teachers today, because of the weaker contracts, are afraid to speak up because of retaliation. So they typically want the union. I was an 18-year teacher, but when I became president of the union, I'm no longer an employee of the district. So I can speak and say things for the employees that sometimes they feel like they can't say for themselves. And one of the reasons we want strong teacher contracts is not to protect the bad teachers, but so that the good ones can actually speak and tell the truth to society about what's going on in our schools. And it's unfortunate that teachers sometimes feel like they can't speak up about what's happening with grading policy, what's happening with working conditions, what's happening with student achievement. They're afraid to speak up because they really are scared for their job.
But I thought it was difficult to fire a teacher because of the unions and the didn't they have a civil service board too or something? I thought it was difficult to fire someone.
Any teacher in Texas can be fired, even on a continuing contract. It's just that then they get a chance to put light on it and have an independent hearing officer, and we can go through this appeal process. But any teacher in Texas can be fired, and especially those.
Do I get unemployment if I get fired?
Sure.
That's what I would need. At any rate, Mr. McMurray, it's been towards the end of our show. Mr. McMurray is president of the Corpus Christi AFT. Thank you for coming on. Is there anything else you wanted to say?
I just want to thank
about,
you, Mr. DiCarlo, for. I really enjoy your show.
Thank you.
I feel like in the community of all the shows that are aired, that you do ask some intellectual questions, some probing questions. I think there's a level of integrity to your show and honesty and complexity that we don't see everywhere.
Oh, thank you. And I wanted people to know, I thank anyone that comes on because they don't know what questions are going to be asked. We try to be fair and not to be scandalous, but thank you for coming on, Ryan.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.